Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our conversation, our session. We will be discussing World Obesity Day. First, I want to start by saying Happy World Obesity Day to every one of you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a part of the session. Thank you for being a part of the discussion. Now, this year, we are focusing specifically on the theme obesity and. Obesity and really you can fill it with whatever you want to put in that block: obesity and mental health, obesity and diet. This year, we are focusing specifically on a conversation around obesity and youth. Now, I want you to be aware that today, throughout our session, we do have interpretation available. You can find that at the bottom of your Zoom page via the interpretation tool on the Zoom app. That's fine. Interpretation is available in Spanish and Portuguese. So if you want to switch to that, you can take a second just to do that. I also heard that today we're going to have quite a few people joining us from all over the world. So I am going to ask you to stick into the chat where you're joining from. Let us know, let us get an idea. And to just see what your thoughts are around obesity, we're going to start with a Mentimeter poll, just to give a little icebreaker, just to get us into the mood for the discussion today. So you can log on to menti.com, and I will put the code in the chat that you will be joining with. So let's do that. Darcy's brilliant. He's already included it there. So if you look for Darcy's message in the chat, you can see what the Menti code is. And we have a quick question for you. What comes to mind? What pops into your head when you think about obesity and youth? What comes up? So if you go to the menti.com, we're going to pull it up on the screen so you can see it there. Perfect. So what comes to mind when you think about the importance of obesity and youth? We have a lot of people joining us from Germany. We got some from Albania, from Brazil. And remember, we do have interpretation available via the Zoom platform. You can check below for Spanish and Portuguese interpretations. Perfect. UNICEF, Jordan, South Africa. Wow. Thanks for joining us, guys. We are super honored to have you all on the call with us. So I only see inspiring. I think we should probably drop the code again in the chat for the Mentimeter. So quick refresh, we're on the Mentimeter and we're asking you to update what comes to mind when you think about the importance of obesity and youth. Physical activity, environment, urgency, scary future. That's an interesting one. Crisis. And we'll be unpacking all this and more throughout our discussion today. But before we hop into the first section, we're going to play a short video from the World Obesity Federation, and they're going to play that right about now.
Obesity is a mix of many factors.
The environment shapes our choices. So let's talk about food system, public places, the workspace, free from stigma and discrimination.
Obesity amongst youth is increasing rapidly, but now we demand change. We are pushing for solutions for youth, by youth.
Let's talk about obesity and health, NCDs, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. Let's talk about solving the problem together.
That was absolutely beautiful. I think it was a little more beautiful for me. It was the first time seeing it, just like the rest of you, but I did see quite a few familiar faces on that video. Now, we're going to hop into what I think is an exciting session, only because we're doing it in a different way, a bit different from what you might be usually accustomed to for your webinar presentations. So I'm not sure how many of you might have seen on interviews, on panels, this quick rapid fire questioning. And basically the idea is we want to put our panelists to the flame just for a couple seconds to kind of get what their thoughts are about obesity, obesity prevention, and what we've been doing in this space. And this morning we have quite the amazing guest, two amazing guests with us. We have Ishu Kataria, who is the chair of the NCD's working group with the WHO Youth Council and a senior public health researcher. Ishu and I have worked together before, and I'm so happy to have her on with us today. And then we also have a WHO expert. One friend described him as the godfather of obesity advocacy and prevention, Francesco Branca, and he's the director of the Department of Nutrition and Food Safety. So welcome, welcome, welcome. We're about to start a rapid fire interview question section. Now I'm going to explain it to you. What's going to happen is I'm going to lead with a question, then I'm going to start a timer. I'll tell you how much time you have to answer the question, and you respond within that time frame. I'll let you know when the time is just about to be up. We're trying to get a timer on screen for you, but I will time on my phone. You might hear a buzzing, and that would mean that your time is essentially up. I'm going to say who I'm starting with, and then we'll get into the discussion. So the first question, you have 30 seconds to respond. 30 seconds to respond. Ishu, I'm going to start with you, and then I'm going to turn over to you, Francesco. 30 seconds. In 30 seconds, I want you to tell me, why is obesity in youth now an issue? Isn't this something that only affects adults and older people? So 30 seconds starting now.
Thanks, Kevin. So I would say that obesity has always been an issue for young people, including children. I would say that it affects them in different ways. So physically, it increases the risk of health conditions such as increased blood pressure, diabetes, sleep apnea, asthma. Mentally, it affects them in the ways of increasing the risk of conditions such as anxiety and depression, stigma, low self-esteem, and also economically, where we see them when they attend work or school, they miss a lot of days because there are issues which are related to the health that they face due to obesity-related diseases. And while they are at school also, they have an increased risk of behavioral problems. So I would say that it's definitely an issue that affects young people.
That is just over 30 seconds, but that's fine. Francesco, we're going to jump on to you, and we're asking you the same question. Building from Ishu's response, why is obesity in youth now an issue? Isn't this just an old people thing? Why are young people supposed to be engaged in this discussion? And your time starts now.
Obesity starts from early life and goes in families, with children of parents with obesity being more susceptible. We have seen, however, more and more children and adolescents with obesity and the comorbidities of obesity, such as type 2 diabetes, appearing much earlier in life. Furthermore, children are targeted by corporate marketing strategies, pushing them to consume foods and drinks high in fats and sugars.
Thank you very much. And you were under time, actually. So we've heard this discussion about why young people might be involved in this discussion, or why obesity and youth is something that we should focus on. And I think in framing that, we want to know, how can we attack another myth? Another myth is, or another thing that's said, is that this is a high-income country issue. This issue of obesity doesn't really apply to low and middle-income countries. Francesca, I'm going to start with you, and you have 30 seconds. Is this true? Is this only a high-income country issue?
No, it's not true. The prevalence of obesity in children and adolescents is highest in the Pacific Islands, up to 40%, but also in the Middle East, the Caribbean, South America, with levels up to 20%, which is similar to what we see in the United States or Australia. The 65 million girls and 94 million boys with obesity live in low and middle income countries as well as in high income countries.
Brilliant. Just on the dot. So we're hearing this, that it's a both high income, middle income, low income country issue. What do you say to that? Is this just a high income country issue?
No, I would also say that it is an issue that affects everyone, even in low and middle income countries. I'm just going to take a quick example, Kevin, here of the issue of weight stigma. We did a study at RTI International in collaboration with UNICEF, where we were looking at adolescents in Brazil, Indonesia, South Africa, about 1,200 of them. And we wanted to see if those who were affected by, as young people, with overweight and obesity, we actually found that they faced weight stigma, they faced negative perceptions, negative comments, had impact on their mental health, which was negative. And it was young women who were facing this more as compared to young men. So it's definitely an issue that affects all, especially with young people in low and middle income countries.
So we're being told now by both of you that the data is there. We're being told that the information is out there. We're hearing just over 80% of young persons living with obesity would be in low and middle income countries. And then we got some live examples. What we want to know now, and we'll give you a bit more time for this. This one is 60 seconds. So let me just key up the timer for 60 seconds. And the question basically is, how did we get here? How do we get to this point where this is the conversation we're having? We're having these myth busting about, whether it's a low middle income country issue. We're having this whole discussion directed specifically on World Obesity Day to the prevention of obesity. How did we get here? And Ishu, I'll start with you in 60 seconds starting now.
I would say, I think it's really important, Kevin, that we are focusing on what are the drivers of overweight and obesity, especially in children, adolescents, and young people. So these could be the environmental and commercial determinants. So for example, the food marketing, the industry interference, the trade-offs that happen, behavioral factors such as lifestyle, social or cultural norms, biological factors, some of the hereditary risk factors or low birth weight, demographic, social, and I would say economic factors as well. So we look at inequity, poverty, lack of access to services. So therefore, these are sort of, I would say, the multiple causes that are around us. These are the drivers. And I think if we have to tackle this, we need to be following a more holistic approach. One of the things that we have, and something that is endorsed by the World Health Organization, are best buys. And those are interventions that have proven to be cost effective. So if they are implemented, they have the capacity of reducing these drivers of obesity and, in fact, non-communicable diseases.
Perfect. And I love how you frame that. You add in this discussion about, the environment and industry interference, which is a big thing we've seen time and time again. And this level of interference at the industry level kind of makes us think about whether there is or has been some political inaction that's led us to this point that we are today. But Francesco, before we continue, I want to hear from you. How do you think we got here to this point with the obesity issue? How did we get here? 60 seconds.
Pierre, Ishu said it very eloquently, so I totally subscribe to what she said. But we have alerted governments of the dangers of the food system transition and the lifestyle changes for the past 20 years. We have recommended policies to curb marketing food to children, to tax sugary beverages, and to create environment for an active life. However, few countries had put in place those policies due to commercial influences. Obesity has been seen the result of personal choices that governments had little to do with. Now that we see that the impact of health on health services, alarm bells have started ringing.
That's perfect. And that kind of discussion kind of tells us that governments are not lacking recommendations. They're not lacking policy recommendations. We've given them that. But we do have an issue, it seems, with political inaction. So we'll continue along. Another 60-second question, so you can think a bit more about this. And we heard it before, climate has become something that young people are leading the charge with. And it seems like now we're picking up the slack because the generation before missed key opportunities to prevent where we are at today with climate. How can we now intentionally integrate young people into shifting the obesity curve so that we don't have our future children dealing with the same issue? How can we turn the tide? Ishu, will start with you, and it's 60 seconds.
So I would say that there are various ways that I think that young people can be meaningfully integrated into this. First, I would say that it would be useful to encourage more young people to dedicate their careers in this area. So I know that there are researchers and practitioners in this movement as young people who are already taking part and taking charge. I would also say that the young people, because they are a strong voice for change in the community, have the ability to be champion ambassadors for their own government programs in the country. I'd like to give you an example of the National Adolescent Health Program of India, where we have young people who are peer educators who actually carry the whole program forward. And also as strong advocates at the grassroots level. With their sort of open-mindedness and innovative and creative thinking, I think young people have this ability to translate and push the messages forward, which are useful for not only themselves, but from their community. Another thing that I'd like to mention very quickly, Kevin, is that there are existing global mechanisms that the young people can utilize. One that I'm also a part of, which is the WHO Youth Council, that has been set up to advise the WHO Director General as well as the senior leadership on the issues that young people face. We, as a working group that works on NCDs, is working on commercial determinants of health, something that's very relevant to what we are discussing now. And will be backed by WHO. So I think there are opportunities for young people to get involved. And I'd be happy if there are any connections that I can make in this regard of young people who might be there on the call with us.
Perfect. So we heard it there from Ishu. We have a direct line to the WHO through the Youth Council to speak about these issues. We can use it. Francesco, what is happening? How can we turn the tide and make sure young people aren't left behind in this move to shift conversations or approach to obesity? How do we move forward?
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Ishu, for saying this. I think we do need this collaboration. What has happened is that at the request of member states who are now seriously alarmed about the severity of the situation, WHO has summarized the existing recommendations on the prevention and management of obesity and even indicated process targets that can be achieved by accelerating the implementation of these cost-effective policies. WHO has developed an acceleration plan that now 31 countries have joined. They have committed to implement the recommended policies on prevention and management, but they still have to overcome the opposition of commercial lobbies, and they will need people's support. So we need a social movement, and the youth can support or lead a social movement that calls for these bold measures and prioritize public health over commercial interests.
Perfect. I'm going to ask you in 1 minute, sorry, 10 seconds, actually. It's a quick response. What is one thing that gives you hope that change is possible? What makes you think that change within this space could be possible? What would you say to a young person in 10 seconds? We'll start with you, Francesco.
The increased commitment of 31 countries. That's a sea of change.
That's brilliant. Ishu?
More young people taking charge of their own health and demanding accountability.
Young people demanding accountability, and we have 31 countries committing to turning the tide. This has been brilliant. This has been absolutely amazing. There is one question we got from the audience we want to put to you to answer in about 30 seconds. How can we advocate for governments to push healthy cities or livable cities for young persons and adolescents? Francesco, starting with you.
Cities have a great responsibility for change and a great opportunity for change. I think we should go to the city's government, to the communities. That's where actually they will influence and inspire national policies.
Perfect. Isha, I'm going to come to you with a bit of a different question. Climate has had an impact on micronutrient or nutrient insecurity, but we just heard about this potential linkage, as you brought out, between climate change and overweight and obesity. Just very quickly, do you mind telling us what that link could be in simple terms for young people? What could be the link between, or what is the link rather, between climate and obesity/overweight?
So I would say that when we are looking at the climate change, we are looking at the changes that are happening in the food environment and the food systems, how it has been impacting young people. And I would say it's just not the young people, it's impacting everyone. And I think that's also contributing to a lot of factors where this environment is influencing us to actually have choices that are contributing to overweight and obesity. So I would say that the whole ecosystem is quite conducive in that sense, that has led to overweight and obesity. And therefore, I would say that it's important that we are not putting the blame on the individual, that, oh, they are making this choice, but it's the ecosystem, the environment that we have to look into as well.
Thank you very much to both of you. It's been brilliant, and it's been my honor to interview both. Francesco, I am honored to have had you as a part of this discussion, and we thank you so much for sharing your time with us young people to discuss this really big issue for us, and as we understand and appreciate, for you as well, an issue we commend you and your team on the work you have been doing with the WHO Youth Council and in your personal capacity, and we do hope to see this continued conversation around obesity prevention and protecting our young people and protecting our future. So that was our quick rapid fire session. We did go a bit over what we initially intended, but we still have lots more to discuss with you guys today. We have lots more to share with you, wonderful people who joined us. And before we shift to the next part of our program, we have a very, very, very special message from an NBA All-Star. Now, when I got this news, I was surprised, but we are excited to have Pau Gasol, who's going to share with us a quick message. He's a UNICEF ambassador and UNICEF Global Champion for Nutrition and Zero Childhood Obesity, in addition to the president of the Gasol Foundation. And just for a bit, we're going to have a special message from Pau.
Hello, friends and partners. I am Pau Gasol, UNICEF Ambassador and Global Champion for Nutrition and Zero Childhood Obesity. Today, on World Obesity Day, I'm thinking about millions of children and young people around the world. Children who are growing up in broken food systems that continue to fail them. Children who, despite their best efforts, cannot access or afford nutritious diets that prepare them for the future. Children who can't spend a single minute of their day without being flooded with relentless junk food marketing. Children who can't even rely on the food in and around schools to nourish their growth and development. Children who, therefore, will have worse health and well-being outcomes both today and tomorrow until we fix this situation. However, I'm also thinking about all those young people who are already leading and demanding the change that needs to happen. From young lawyers in the Philippines working on food policy reform, to youth activists in South Africa working with peers to combat the stigma around overweight and obesity, to youth climate entrepreneurs in Jordan shaping healthier and more sustainable futures, or the youth parliamentarians from Barbados who fight for a seat at the policy-making table, and the young campaigners in the UK taking on the food and beverage industry. Those young people who are brave enough to harness their lived experience to bring perspectives to the conversation. And those young people carving out careers in the medical and research fields to improve how we care for each other. But we still have a lot of work to do together. Today's event is an exciting moment as the Global Obesity Coalition, made up of UNICEF, WHO, and the World Obesity Federation, brings all these youth changemakers from around the world together to inspire our next chapter, a chapter to mobilize a global movement around accelerating progress to reduce childhood overweight and obesity rates. As the president of the Gasol Foundation, I'm proud to continue supporting UNICEF and partners in these efforts, and to continue lifting the voices of inspiring young people like the ones you'll hear from today. We know what needs to be done and what needs to happen. We have the evidence. We know what works. And now we must have the momentum to encourage the right political leadership for action. So please, listen to the youth voices you'll hear from today, and let's do this together.
You know, I sat here, watched that video, and I got goosebumps as Pau made reference to the brilliant work that young people have been doing in different parts of the world. Young lawyers, young advocates, the young parliamentarian from Barbados, the conversations that we need to have. He suggested young people need to lead that charge. And I think this next section will kind of give you a sense of the power and value of engaging young people meaningfully within this space. because we do have a beautiful group of 6 panelists, young persons who are going to chat with us for just about 20 minutes about where we're at in this fight to ensure young persons have a healthier future, a healthier environment, live healthier lives. So I'm going to invite my panelists to just turn their videos on. We're going to do some quick rapid fire introductions. I see Maria, I see Luke, and the others will join me right now. Perfect, cool. So on our panel, just for the discussion today, we have Eva, who's a UNICEF volunteer and youth advocate from South Africa. We also have Rahaf, who's a youth climate activist and founder for Health in Jordan. We have Katrina, who's a policy associate at Imagine Law in the Philippines. Maria, who is a patient advocate from the US. We have Luke, a youth activist from Bite Back, UK. And then we have Letitia, who's a nursing student in Brazil. So this is a beautiful combination of beautiful minds who have been doing the work for the last number of years, are more than skilled to have this discussion here with us today. And so we're going to go through this conversation. We're going to ask you a couple of questions, and I want you to think about it because we're framing the stage for young people around the world to understand what's happening. So we're considering then that young people are already stretched thin across other advocacy movements, other advocacy environments. We're in other social movements, climate crisis, we've been having this discussion. But why should obesity then be something that young people mobilize around? Why do we have to focus on obesity as something for us to focus on? Now, Eva, I want to start with you. How or why is this something that young people should focus on in terms of obesity when we already have to focus on mental health, when we already have to focus on stigma? Why should we come here?
I think when I really look at the reality of the conversation circulating around obesity and overweight, it's something that as young people we don't really talk about. And that really comes from this deep embedded stigma that we may have, maybe just thinking that, okay, obesity and overweight is something that's kind of far-fetched to us. It doesn't really concern us as young people. But in actual fact, it's actually really scary to just think about, like, even the implications and the serious implications that obesity has among young people, and not so in that state, but even just looking at diabetes within South Africa. So diabetes is a very common thing when we talk about non-communicable diseases, which is something that actually affects us. It begins at a young stage, at our stage, which is quite young, and it has a very long-term consequence to us really being affected by just this implication. So I really think that this conversation of obesity and overweight is something that we should really talk about as young people.
Brilliant. Thank you, Eva, for sharing that. And thank you for sharing that beautiful perspective. Rahaf, if we could just hear from you. We have heard and people have asked in the chat and otherwise about this intersection with climate and health. What then, or why then, should young people be focused on obesity with that general background?
Yeah, actually, it's a very important question because addressing obesity is crucial for young people because it intersects with both the climate crisis and health. Sustainable food choices and active lifestyles not only contribute to personal well-being, but also it reduces the environmental impact, but also in addition to the unhealthy diet, mobilizing around obesity align with the broader effort to promote a healthier planet and also contribute to environmental sustainability because, unhealthier diet and healthier food have a negative impact in the sustainability, have negative impact in the climate. So again, making mindful choices about food and lifestyles can have a positive impact on both individual well-being and also the broader global challenges like the climate crisis. It's a holistic approach to creating a healthier world, but that's why it's very important to mobilize around it.
Perfect. And we're hearing again why young people should shift our energies to this space. And Katrina, if we can just hear from you again, why do young people need to get involved in this space? Why should we need to focus on obesity?
when we talk about health, it's important to recognize that states hold the responsibility to protect and promote the right to health of their citizens. And in the context of obesity prevention, it's essential to consider that not only is it a public health issue, but also to consider it through a lens of rights promotion. So by right, everyone should have equal opportunities in terms of food choices and diets, regardless of their individual background, social class, or whatever. And my decision to engage in policy advocacy stemmed from a desire to have a broader impact. While lawyering allows you to help an individual or the group at a given occasion, advocating for policy changes allows you to influence the systems that govern society. And addressing the complex issue of obesity necessitates a holistic approach, integrating legal, policy, and societal measures. Young people have a critical role to play in this effort, not only as advocates for change, but also as beneficiaries of the policies that will shape the health landscape of their country for years to come. So, mobilizing around obesity is not just about addressing a current public health issue, but it's also about investing in the future health and prosperity of the nation.
That is brilliant. I think we have someone whose mic is unmuted. So, Luana, if you could just mute your mic for a bit. And then we'll get on to our next panelists. Thanks again for sharing that perspective, Katrina. I love that you brought out the rights-based focus. That is something that some people, especially if you're in a legal background as a young person, it doesn't mean you don't get to engage in this conversation. You could engage in it from a rights-based perspective. Maria, this is a perspective that we don't often hear, and from your experience, why do you think young people need to get involved or get into this conversation about obesity? Why do we need to?
It's so important because millions of people are living with this disease. It's not a rarity, and it comes with so many medical comorbidities, but also lifestyle implications for people living with obesity. Everything from a diabetes diagnosis to just students not being able to physically fit into their desks in a classroom or be able to participate fully in physical education classes. Obesity is not only an incredibly visible disease and one of the only arguably visible diseases, but it's one that impacts almost every aspect of the lives of people who have it. So mobilizing around the people that we love that have this disease and helping them, supporting them, and making their lives better is incredibly important.
Maria, and I want to frame this for persons so they understand just how important it is. I want you to share with us just briefly, you've had this experience, and I think you're saying this from a background of you would have liked this support from young people, from your peers. Could you share that perspective with us just for a second on why, again, young people should be involved in this space and how that would have supported you during your experience?
Definitely. I have had obesity my whole life from the age of 4. I had bariatric surgery at 14, so as a freshman in high school. And I experienced bullying because of my size, both from my peers and from the administration in my school. I've been told by school nurses to be ashamed of myself for my weight. And that didn't help. It didn't get me to a better place. Having the love and support of my family and my really close friends got me to a better place, got me 100 plus weight loss and maintaining it over the last 14 years, knock on wood. If I had had greater support earlier in life, I may not have gotten to 443 pounds at 14. We'll never know, but definitely having that support that I have had has been amazing. And I hope that every child and adolescent with obesity has.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you, Maria. And I think for those of you on the call, on the session, who may think, I'm not exactly a legal person. I'm not exactly a climate activist. I'm not exactly the biggest person who wants to get on a stage and public speak. But you could still support the obesity movement in your personal capacity. You could be a good friend. You could be a great listening ear. You can support your friend with their goals or their commitments. There are ways for you to support, and it all doesn't have to come in the form of on a stage, on a webinar, speaking to how much ever people are in this room today. There are other ways that you can support. And Luke, I think you have another unique perspective to share with us in the sense that some persons may prefer not to be up at that high level of advocacy. Some persons may prefer just to support their friends, but who then is left to tackle industry? Who then is left to speak to the big guy who's doing the thing in their factory to make money? How do we get involved in that? And then why should young people be involved in, fighting food industry, big industry?
Absolutely, yeah. So at Bite Back, we campaign against a food system that is basically set up to fool us. It is set up to make sure that it is not easy for me to eat healthily. And it is absolutely my and all of the young people's opinion at Bite Back that it should be easy to eat healthily. And in the UK, that really isn't a reality. And I hope that would be something that is probably echoed, sadly, across the world. And we did a piece of research which came out last week, which said that 7 out of 10 of the UK's biggest food companies actually rely on junk food and selling high fat, salt, sugar products, often to children. They often market to children. They use misleading tactics on packaging. They will be using a flood of junk food advertising across high streets, on school buses, things like that. I might walk to the bus stop, for example, and there'll be a burger standing me right in the face. And then I'll get my bus ticket, I'll turn it over, and there'll be a milkshake. And we want to expose the reality for every young person in the UK that there really is a problem with junk food advertising and that it is the thing that is playing a starring role in children's minds. So when we look at the statistics, 1 in 3 children are at risk of a future food-related ill health. It's no wonder that these things are happening when these companies are using these sinister tactics to fool us. And that's what this piece of research and this campaign with Bite Back looks to uncover.
It's scary to think about because just the way you framed it, you get a ticket. On the back of the ticket, there's maybe a coupon for some milkshake. You're on your way to school. You're just trying to get an education, and on your way to school, you're seeing this big burger on the double decker, and you're kind of like, well, I now want a double burger. It's pervasive. Everywhere you go, you see the examples of industry interference at the biggest level and even at the micro level, interfering, or some might say corrupting, the choices you make on what you consume. But then the question has to be asked, what does our health system look like? If our food system is so convoluted and confusing, what does our health system look like? And is that a space that young people are needed as advocates for obesity prevention? Do we need to be engaged in that space? Letitia, I want to hear from you. How should or how can young persons get involved within the health system space? And what are the key areas for advocacy that we should engage in? Letitia, that's on to you. Can you hear me?
Que prazer estar aqui nesse momento falando um pouco mais sobre obesidade aí com vocês, né? Falando no contexto brasileiro em geral, nós sabemos que os jovens eles vêm marcando história em movimentos sociais aqui no Brasil, né? A gente sabe que quando uma criança ela tem sobrepeso, ela tem 75% de chance de se tornar um adulto obeso. Então, a gente tem que tomar muito cuidado com essas estatísticas aí, né? E pensando na realidade brasileira, no sistema único de saúde, que é gratuito para todos aqui na população brasileira, e como estudante de enfermagem da Universidade Federal de Minas Gerais, a gente percebe que essa realidade, ela não é muito abraçada. Como a Maria mesmo disse, a gente não tem apoio quando a gente vai tratar a obesidade, né? E na atenção primária, a gente tem várias lacunas que precisam ser melhoradas, tanto em apoio, quanto em educação à população, quanto em aspecto nutricional também. Então, a gente tem vários contextos que nós precisamos ser trabalhados aí, fazendo grupos para ajudar as pessoas, e o jovem, ele tem essa capacidade de permear esses valores sociais, né? Então, ele determina conceitos culturais para os sucessores sociais. Então, desse modo, nessa concepção, inserir os jovens em movimentos sociais sobre a obesidade pode mudar o rumo dos dados atuais, visando uma melhoria desse contexto atual que a gente vive hoje mundialmente.
Sorry, I didn't realize my mic was muted, but perfect, thank you. I think that perspective again, for those of you who might not have been aware before, just below we do have the interpretation key so you can switch to English. But basically what Letitia was telling us is that young persons do have the brilliant ability to use our skills learning from our social environment, learning from what is happening around us, we do have this amazing ability to come together and push for advocacy and change. And basically what she's saying is that that is where we need to go. Use that momentum, use that power, use that collective energy to push for change within this obesity prevention space. And generally, that's what we've been saying here. That's generally what the conversation has been. We heard from a legal background, we heard from the climate activist, the patient care perspective, the industry perspective, that young persons should get involved in these spaces. Now, we're going to drill down a bit more, because part of the idea of this webinar is that we want young persons to leave with an idea of how they can get involved in specific areas. Each of you work in specific fields, and so I'm kind of speaking to you to find out your expertise. It's not my expertise. I'm at best a law student. Sometimes I cosplay as a law student. Most days I'm managing my mental health. But I want to hear from you, from your personal experiences and the work you've done, how young persons could get involved in obesity advocacy. How could they get involved in mental health and obesity, or rather obesity and mental health, or obesity and climate change? Eva, I'm going to start with you. And I want to hear about from you. I'm big on mental health. I'm big in conversations about protecting our mental health. How can young persons get involved in this space if they want to work with obesity prevention or around obesity advocacy?
I think it really begins by first starting to have the conversation. Just as much as we started freely talking about mental health and its implications, and really even just coming together, raising awareness for mental health, we can do the same thing with obesity. But I really think what we first really need to just be aware of is what the implications of with regards to obesity, and really just be made aware of this conversation that circulates around obesity and overweight, really realizing that there are many more complexities that we don't really know about. And most of the time we have this deep embedded stigma of just, how obesity looks, what it's about, instead of actually sitting down to have a conversation about it. So I really think it really starts by first having a conversation and facilitating these conversations through even just that information sharing, information giving, and even just receiving that information and becoming aware of the implications of obesity and overweight. So yeah, that's what I really think we should start with.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I told you I couldn't have said it better, because it's not my expert area, but you've managed to tell us in a brilliant way that we should pay attention to both the physical impacts, the mental impacts of overweight or obesity on young persons, and just be engaged in that area of advocacy. Rahaf, I do want to find out from you about this intersection with climate change and health. It's one of those, if I dare say, sexier topics, this climate change thing. It's the advocacy that most people get involved in, but why should we then focus on obesity within, sorry, not why, how can we focus on obesity within this space?
Yes, actually, thank you for this question. Young people from diverse background, not from the climate background also, can address obesity by promoting awareness, as my friend said, advocating for healthier community environment and fostering sustainable habits. Also, they can engage in a program that aim to increase the knowledge about climate effects, the knowledge about what is the effect of these unhealthier habits in the environment and in their selves. And it should to actually reduce it. There is a lot of programs that work with youth to empower their knowledge about the climate effect and how can the obesity and the healthier habit can help to reduce the effects of obesity, such as SANU program is one of the programs that is with the UNICEF Jordan that participate at it, and helped me a lot to increase my knowledge about climate effect and how we can link climate effect with the healthier habits, and how we can use good healthier diet that help a lot to reduce this obesity. In addition to, I think there is a lot of solutions can make it with the youth, with the kids from all around the world, like supporting local and affordable access to nutrition food and creating spaces for physical activities. Collaborating with the schools, community leaders, and health organizations can amplify their effort and ensure a more inclusive approach to tackling obesity. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. Very comprehensive response and very well packaged. I think what we want to find out then is this conversation around how young persons could be involved in the legal discussions around obesity prevention, how we can be involved in the food policy discussions. Katrina, I'm going to come to you. Just tell us for a second where, if there's any space for us to be involved and how we could hit the ground running.
Yeah. There are various strategies for addressing obesity from legal and food policy perspectives. At the community level, it's important to engage in educational campaigns and programs. Collaborating with local governments to host workshops and seminars on nutrition can greatly impact public awareness. Advocating for local governments to implement ordinances that promote a healthy food environment is also an effective approach. On a national scale, one can advocate for legislation that helps consumers avoid unhealthy food, such as clear front of package labeling, restrictions on marketing of unhealthy foods to children, government procurement of healthy food for their projects, and mandatory calorie labeling on menus. Collaborating with government agencies to launch campaigns that promote healthy eating and active lifestyles can also be beneficial. Legislative actions and policy improvements are crucial in creating an environment that supports healthier choices. So there you go.
Thank you very much. I started beaming because, as I said, I sometimes cosplay as a law student. It's not my main job. I just cosplay as a law student. So I was really happy to hear this conversation about human rights and legal systems, front of package warning label, building on your right to information. And that speaks to the legal environment. That speaks to the government's role in playing a part. But Maria, you can then tell us how young persons can get involved in this patient advocacy aspect. How can we get involved in supporting patients or just being a part of the conversation to look for better situations for people within this space? How can young people do that?
Definitely. There are so many ways to get involved. I personally have done a multitude of them. You name them, I've tried them. There is lobbying efforts at your local government level, all the way up to, at least in the United States, national level. My first advocacy role ever was actually lobbying the United States Congress for the passage of Childhood Obesity Awareness Month. I did that at 14 years old and we got it passed. There is the ability to simply advocate for your classmate, your friend, your family member. Stand up for them if you see harassment, bullying, inappropriate behavior towards someone with obesity. There is opportunities to participate in awareness groups. So I used to be a member of the Obesity Action Coalition, which is based in Tampa, Florida. They do a lot of governmental advocacy and other advocacy efforts around the United States.
Yep.
There's all kinds of opportunities. Just find one that works for you as long as you're finding your voice and standing up for people.
Thank you very much. So find your voice, stand up, speak up for those around you. Luke, again, from this industry perspective, some people were very excited about that conversation you had on tackling industry, but how could young persons get involved within this space?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's so important that young people get involved because most of the time they are the ones being targeted by this junk food marketing because it's most effective to children, right? Because they're one of our most vulnerable groups. But I think when it comes to getting involved, it's really important to find a common message that everyone can resonate with, especially young people. And when I can just, for example, describe my day-to-day life, I might wake up and I might scroll on Instagram, for example, or another social media platform, and there'll be an advert for a burger or there'll be an advert for another fast food chain. It's constantly all I see. One of my friends got his exam results. We have some big exams which happen when you're like 17, 18 in the UK. And the first text message he got on his phone, it wasn't from his grandmother or his mother or his father. It was actually from a fast food chain congratulating him on his results. And it's so clear that, especially in the UK, but I would expect this is around the world, that it's so present and the food system is arguably so corrupt by these food companies that young people have to get involved. And as soon as they start to realize their food system is so twisted against them, I think everybody starts to find their voice when they realize the reality of the food system they live in.
Okay, brilliant. And we do have that experience of that cheeky message coming right after exams. Come have a meal with us at a discounted rate if you show your results. We've seen it. And Letitia, I just want to hear from you very quickly. We're coming on to the end of this. our healthcare systems. And just a reminder, for those of you who may have questions, you can drop them in the chat, and we'll respond via there. I'll pose some questions to the panelists, but you can just let us know in the Q&A sections what questions you may want to ask them. But Letitia, just for you, health systems and care, how could young persons specifically get involved in this area?
Então, eu acredito que com o lugar de fala, tá? O lugar de fala tem o objetivo não de restringir a troca de ideias, encerrar uma discussão ou impor uma opinião, mas sim de abrir uma nova janela com a perspectiva de quem ainda não conseguia se expressar livremente na sociedade, o que acontece com as pessoas portadoras da obesidade, tá? E sabemos que no Brasil nós temos diversas falas que agridem essas pessoas, que essas pessoas se sintam ressentidas em voltar ao sistema público de saúde, né? Nesse contexto, a gente sabe que a obesidade é muito além do contexto nutricional, né? Então, nós precisamos pensar que fazer políticas sociais para que a sociedade nos ouça e nos veja é muito importante. Uma das ações por mim realizada é a divulgação de informação sobre obesidade e cirurgia bariátrica, pois eu realizei a cirurgia bariátrica. Além disso, eu promovo educação em saúde para os meus seguidores, né? Então, a obesidade é muito além da nutrição. A obesidade precisa ser tratada em contextos socioculturais para conseguirmos abaixar as estatísticas atuais dessa doença. Eu acredito que dessa forma nós conseguiremos, seguindo esse caminho, tratando a obesidade multifatorial, não só apenas com a nutrição.
Brilliant. Just again, that importance on the multi-sectoral approach to addressing obesity prevention. Now, you guys very quickly get your one opportunity at my excellent rapid fire interviewing skills. So you have 5 seconds to each of you, and I'm timing it. My fingers will be up, to tell me where you would like to see young persons more. Where would you like to see more young persons in terms of obesity prevention advocacy? Eva, I'm starting with you. When you see my last finger go down, that's it. 5 seconds, go.
Within our university campuses, within schools, and within our households, and within our friends.
Perfect. Rahaf, 5 seconds.
I'm gonna see him in a good way that doesn't have obesity and they have a good health with climate eco-friendly solutions.
5 seconds, perfect. Katrina, 5 seconds.
They should be more present in policy advocacy and changing the laws of their own countries. That's it.
Perfect. And Maria, 5 seconds. Where should we see more young people?
Interpersonally with the people that we love and care for.
Perfect. And Luke, where should we see more young people?
Within industry, talking to the food companies that are responsible for the downfall of child health.
5 seconds, perfect. Letitia, we'll come to you. 5 seconds, where should we see more young people?
Em contextos sociais, culturais e políticos. Então, em todas as esferas globais.
Social, cultural, political context in all global spheres. And ladies and gentlemen, that is it. We have just had a beautiful conversation with young persons from all over the world: South Africa, Jordan, the USA, the UK. All our young people came together today basically to say to us, it is time for us to focus on obesity and youth. Obesity and mental health, obesity and climate change is time for us to turn the tide. And we do encourage you to continue with your discussions, to continue engaging in this advocacy space. We thank you all for joining us. We thank you to the inspiring young leaders on the call. We thank you to those of you, the World Obesity Federation, UNICEF, those who are part of the coalition and bringing this together. And we also want to flag to all the inspiring youth leaders that the International Congress on Obesity has an Emerging Youth Leader Award. And it would be nice to have one of you win that in time. So we encourage you to apply. We will share the link in the chat so you can see it. And just from the team here, we do also want to encourage you to use the hashtag World Obesity Day on your Twitter, on your Instagram, make a TikTok, go for a walk, take a video, post some hashtags. We want to see your activities. We want to see you getting involved. We want to see you getting engaged. If you want to share a photo and tag World Obesity Federation, you can tag us or UNICEF. Just tag, put the hashtags, and we'll be sure to share and engage in your conversations, because we do want more persons to understand that obesity is not just an older people issue. Obesity is not just a 20 years ago issue. Obesity is an issue now. Preventing obesity and dealing with the ramifications is something we need to look at now. We're calling for policies. We're calling for mental health interventions. We're calling for a marriage between climate change and obesity prevention. We want patients to be at the front of our advocacy campaigns because their concerns in health matter to us. Health systems need to be reshifted and refocused. We need to tackle big industry, and we can't all do it by ourselves. And again, this is why we need young persons. We need older persons. We need everyone to be a part of this conversation. It was my pleasure, and I do welcome you to have a wonderful rest of your day as we continue this conversation on obesity and youth. We're out.